All right. Hopefully that brought up a lot of cringe memories that you didn't want to think about. But yeah, I think middle school is like a prime age for cringeness. But it's also because it's the age of insecurity, right? I think because of your insecurity, you want to fit in, be accepted, and then you do a lot of stuff that you regret. So these are the themes that we'll actually talk about today. We talk about a woman who's not trying to fit in with the crowd anymore, but she has that same deep desire that we all had, the desire to be seen, to be accepted, to be loved. So in her case, she's failed quite a few times, so we'll read about it. But then she meets Jesus in the end of the text. And then something happens in that conversation, and something so powerful that happens that transforms her completely, right? So what happens? What are they talking about? What can we learn from it? So we're going to dive in. You guys have the passage in front of you. So in your groups, just read through the chapter or the passage and then talk about this. What emotions do you think she's feeling at each point of her conversation? At each point of the conversation, there's some turning points that there is, and then talk about it with the people around you. What emotions is she thinking, feeling? And then you can also pick an emoji or one more description that captures her emotions if that's easier. So let's do that with the people around you. So you can turn your chairs and things like that. So, all right. Yeah, it's a long passage. I'm sure, hopefully, for a lot of you, it's a familiar passage. We want to talk about the different emotions that she's feeling, and hopefully that helped you kind of get into the mindset of the woman at the well. So John 4, he kind of starts up with this statement. He left Judea and departed again for Galilee, and he had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria?" For Jews had no dealings with Samaritans. So just as a quick historical background, there was a lot of hatred between the Jews and the Gentiles, the non-Jews. And Samaritans were born from a union of Jews and Gentiles, the non-Jews. So considerably, Jews considered them religiously impure and socially unclean because of that. In fact, here's a map of Samaria, where Samaria is. So Jews going to Galilee from Judea would go around Samaria, all the way around for, I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, around to Galilee so that they don't have to pass through Samaria. But it says in the text that Jesus had to pass through Samaria, right? So it's interesting. And that wasn't shocking enough. Here's another cultural barrier. Men did not speak with women in public. So especially not a rabbi with the Samaritan woman. So it makes sense that this woman has biting words in verse 9. How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? This was a conversation that by every cultural standard should have never happened, racially, socially, culturally, yet we see Jesus intentionally breaking all barriers to save this one daughter. After breaking that barrier to start this conversation, Jesus shifts it into a surprising conversation. So Jesus, So Jesus asked for water, and then this woman's reply in verse 9 shows attitude because of the ethnic tension that we mentioned. But there's also another reason why she kind of becomes like that, and we see a clue in verse 6. It says, Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. Jesus is having this conversation in the 6th hour. Back then, they counted the hours from sunrise, so it's about 12 to 1 p.m., the hottest time of the day. Normally, women came out early in the morning when it was cool, and they would draw water together, talking, socializing, gossiping, right? Maybe complaining about their husbands. So the question is, why is she coming out at this time of the hour? And why is John indicating that? Well, it turns out the woman has been married for so woman's been married 5 times and has been divorced 5 times, and is now living with the man who isn't her husband. Even by today's standards, that would raise eyebrows. And in her culture, it would have meant deep shame and isolation. She's probably the talk of the town, right? She's probably the source of the gossip. So it makes sense that she would come at this hour, and because she's avoiding all the embarrassment and the looks that she would get. But Jesus knew that she would be there, and he intentionally goes there, breaking all cultural barriers to engage in that conversation. So here we have this conversation. Jesus says, "Give me a drink." He would have, if you would have asked him, he would have given you the living water. And then the woman says, "Where do you get that living water?" And Jesus says, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but if you drink this living water, you will never be thirsty again." And then the woman says, "Give me this water." So it's interesting as they talk about water, and it's a metaphor. There is something deeper going on, but the woman plays along and says, like, "Where can I get this water?" Right? On the surface, they're talking about like water, but clearly Jesus is not talking about H2O, right? The H2O water, because there's no way there's water in this world that where you drink it, you will never be thirsty again, right? If there was, my wife needs one because she's always asking for water, right? And you also probably want that. So Jesus isn't talking about that. He's talking about something deeper, right? Going with the water analogy, water satisfies thirst. There's a deeper thirst that no water can satisfy. And we call that the spiritual thirst. Spiritual thirst inside of us that every human being feels. And that's why Jesus uses the metaphor of water, because deep down, we're all thirsty. This woman had been chasing that satisfaction again and again, but she could never quite find it, right? Do you relate to that feeling? So for her, what was it? It was love for her. In particular, romantic love, right? Marriage. Just imagine this woman. I wonder why she was married 5 times. I just wonder. You can almost imagine her journey. Each marriage perhaps starting with hope. I mean, like no little girl would think, when I grow up, I'm going to be married 5 times. Right? That doesn't make any sense. On that first wedding day, I'm sure she was filled with excitement. And I don't know how they did it back then, but the preacher says, "Will you take blank to be your husband, to love him in sickness and in health, till death do you apart?" And the woman replies, "I do." There was hope. We don't know exactly what happened, but it ends in a divorce. And then she finds another person. Maybe she thought, like, this time it'll work. This time I found the one. But over and over again, it ends in disappointment. So she keeps coming back to the well, not just for water, but just because her soul is still thirsty. And I think there's something very relatable and understandable about her, because I think in all of us, there is this deep thirst for love and acceptance. And I think we're not so different. So before we move on, why don't you guys talk to people around you? What are some things people do to try to gain that love and acceptance? Right? We sort of talked about it in the beginning, but why do you think people often look for satisfaction in things that never seem to satisfy? So let's do that for a couple minutes. So there's a lot of things, right, people do. Hopefully you guys got to talk about it. I think for some, it's romance, right? We all try to satisfy that same deep thirst in various ways. For others, it's career success, money, right, or approval of others. We chase after these things, hoping they'll fill us. But time and time again, we end up empty. For me, it was getting approval. Some of you guys have heard my story. I tried so hard to excel in school and prove to others that I was the best through success. And for a moment, it felt good. Every compliment, every success that I gave me a little rush, but it never lasted. After a few days, the satisfaction faded, and I was right back to striving again. No matter how much I achieved, there was this inner emptiness, a soul thirst that nothing could quench. Can you relate to this? Right? Having this soul thirst that can't be quenched, like having this itch that cannot be scratched. Maybe some of you guys are still in that searching phase, hoping that this thing you're pursuing will satisfy. I mean, a lot of you guys are successful college students at Drexel and Penn, and you put all your hope in the next grade or the next internship, the co-op, or even a girl or a guy. And maybe you just haven't had coming into that emptiness again. But we need to take heart in what Jesus says in verse 13, that everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. It's not a warning, it's a fact. It's something you've tried and people have tried and it came up empty again. Everything this world has to offer, no matter how good it seems, it will eventually leave us empty, thirsty. And you know why? It's because in our hearts, God has put eternity in our hearts. The deepest part of our hearts, we know that death is coming to all of us. And we know intuitively that nothing in this world will satisfy that, because everything that we're pursuing is very temporary. I was at a memorial service yesterday for one of our pastors, Pastor Will. Pastor Will was very dear to my heart, and as I was standing there at the burial, as I saw his lifeless body within a coffin, just going down into the grave, into the ground, I just couldn't help but think, like, that will be my fate one day. That will be our fate, all of our fates, one day. So what is this next grade, next internship, co-op, guy or girl, what is that going to do for my eternity? Right? Nothing. God says, to dust you shall return. And we know that pursuing these things, it'll come empty again. You'll end up become thirsty again. So how do we respond? How do we respond from this? C.S. Lewis says this: if we find ourselves with the desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. What he's saying is profound. We all have desires. We have hunger, and there's something in the world that can satisfy that, right? We have hunger, and there's food that satisfies that. We have thirst, water that satisfies. We need rest, right? We are tired. Rest can satisfy that. But if there's a desire in us that nothing in this world can satisfy, then it's a sign that there is something or someone else outside of this world that can satisfy, because our desires were meant to be satisfied. The Bible puts it this way: God made us to have a relationship with Him. And apart from Him, we'll find no rest. Our souls will be thirsty until we recognize that what we need is God's love above anything else. If we go after other things outside of God, then we'll end up thirsty again and again. There is a God-shaped void in our hearts. It's like being lost at sea. Like when you're lost at sea, people get tempted to become thirsty and tempted to drink the salt water. Drinking it feels okay at the moment, but will actually make you thirstier, and you're not supposed to drink that. Same with the world. We have a soul thirst. And if we try to fit it with what the world has to offer, romance, success, acceptance, I'm going to tell you right now, you will become thirsty again. even more thirsty than before. Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." I hope that this can be your attitude as well, the woman. At this point, it's not entirely clear if the woman actually understood what Jesus was saying, but by the end of the conversation, she sort of gets it, right? She says, "Sir, give me this water." She's tired. She's been married 5 times, and now with the 6th man, she doesn't even bother getting married. She's at the end of her rope, right? Disappointed and worn out. And that's often where people finally become open to Jesus, when they realize that nothing else works, that every other well runs dry. It's the end of ourselves that we often try to drink deeply from the living water. But this openness comes after a lot of regrets, a lot of painful mistakes, and countless false hopes for this woman, right? But you don't have to go down that same road to learn that lesson. You don't have to drink from every empty well to realize that it's empty. They don't satisfy. So take Jesus at his word now, that everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. Turn to him, trust him when he says that nothing in this world will satisfy your soul. Only he can. So if the story ended in verse 15, with the woman request for water and Jesus simply saying, "Sure, no problem, here you go," like that would have been a happy ending to the story, right? Instead, this is how Jesus responds: "Go call your husband and come here." And this woman is caught off guard, like, "I have no husband. I have no husband." On the surface, that's a sort of true statement because she doesn't have a husband. But Jesus knows that and says, "You're right. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true." And the woman is cornered in verse 19. She says, "You must be a prophet." So why does Jesus bring this up? Why does Jesus bring this up? It's a painful topic to talk about. And the very reason why the woman is at the well at this time, 6th hour, to avoid other women. But Jesus brings it up, indicating that he knows. So why? The one answer is that before we can receive the living water, we need to confront our failed attempt and shame. We need to confront our shame, because if we don't admit to the fact that we have failed, then we cannot accept this living water, because you're still pursuing this other water that might satisfy. So we need to accept that. The other answer is that Jesus is showing that he knows her shame already. He knows what she did and what she's ashamed of. He understands why she does what she does. Not only does he know what we've done, he wants to tell her that he's known from the beginning. Instead of shunning her or avoiding her, he comes through Samaria, right? Engages in conversation, and here we see an amazing insight into God. Not only does he know what we've done, he also wants us to know that he knows. I don't know what kind of shame you guys deal with. And in a room like this, there's past hurts and shame that you carry that resulted from this search for love, from this thirst. God wants to let you know that he knows. He knows already. Yet, he doesn't shun you or avoid you. He wants to engage in conversation to give you living water. Deep down, we all want love and acceptance. That's what makes my kids go crazy and silly, because they want that love and acceptance, like they want attention. That's what made a lot of you silly in middle school to be accepted, right? All because of love and acceptance. But I want to suggest to you that to be fully loved, we must be fully known first. And being fully known is scary because it means letting someone see the parts that we'd rather hide, right? But if someone knows the very worst about you and yet still chooses to love you, that's true love, right? So let's talk about this. True love requires true knowledge, what I just said. So do you think it's more frightening to be loved for a curated image of yourself or to be truly known with all your flaws and risk not being loved? These are the two sides that we're trying to balance, right? So let's talk about this for a couple minutes with the people around you. Yeah, so it's really powerful when someone knows you and loves you still, right? Mary and I have been married for over 8 years now. Do you think she loves me more now or when we first got married? I don't want to know, but like she knows me more and more of my flaws now. Like she knows that there are things about me that is not going to change because she's tried for the past 8 years and I'm just going to be me. But she still loves me, and that is powerful, right, for me to understand that. So much more for God's love, right? God's love. He knows us even more fully, but He still loves us. And how do we know that? It's through the cross, right? On the cross, we see the truth of who we are, sinners, so bad that Jesus had to die for us. On the cross, we see how much we have sinned, that it required that kind of punishment for the sins that we commit. And yet we see the love, right? Because we had to be on the cross. We were supposed to be on the cross, but Jesus steps in instead of us. God so loved the world that He sent Jesus to die for our sins. That's being truly known and truly loved. So in the same way, we need to be truly known. We need to go to God to be known, to confess all the failed ways that we were pursuing love outside of God. And in that way, God is saying, I know already, but I love you. So after being confronted with the truth of who she is, this is what the woman says. Sir, I perceive that you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is a place where people ought to worship. So there is like a context where people need to worship at Jerusalem or this other place, and she's kind of getting clarification on that. But the woman starts talking about worship right away. It may feel random, but now that she's been confronted with the truth of who she is, and now that she sees Jesus as some kind of a person from God, she wants to know, how do I properly worship God then? Jesus says, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on the mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For the Father is seeking such people to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth. Woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, He who is called Christ. When He comes, He will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am He. So I don't have time to go into all the details of this spirit and truth, similar to John 3 when we talked about it last time. But the woman, what I want to focus on here is that God revealed Himself to this woman, right? The woman tells Jesus, the Messiah, the Savior is coming, and I'm going to wait until He tells us all these things. And Jesus tells this woman, of all the people in the world, I who speak to you am He. I am that Messiah. I'm the one you've been waiting for. And it's amazing, in the Gospel of John, she's the first one to find that out, right? She's the first one that Jesus reveals His identity. First recorded big reveal in the Gospel of John. This text shows us that she's been looking for God, but actually God's been looking for her. Ever since the fall in Genesis, when we chose to not trust in God and to be our own gods, we had cravings that we lost, the unconditional love. Right? Because of the lack of unconditional love, acceptance, and approval, we were trying all these things to fulfill that thirst. And we want it so badly that we try to fill that with success, romance, attention, and other things, but we're never satisfied, always thirsting for more. And Jesus says, I who speak to you am He. I am that living water. I am that source that will not make you thirsty again. So once this woman understands who Jesus is, she has a radical transformation, like I said, right? Verse 28 to 29. So the woman left her water jar, went away into town, said to the people, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ? They went out of the town and were coming to him. After meeting Jesus, she leaves her water jar. She runs to town and tells everyone she was trying to avoid that she's found the one that they've been searching for, the Messiah. She tells them, come see a man who told me all that I ever did. And the townspeople are like, all you ever did? Yeah, I know some of that, right? But she doesn't mind anymore, right? That's the complete transformation that she's experiencing. She was avoiding them before, but now she's facing them because her past is now turned into her testimony. Right? That's the beautiful picture of someone who genuinely knows Jesus. Our past hurts and shame that came from pursuing these other love, it turns into a testimony, a beautiful testimony of how Jesus fulfills that. And this is true for all of us who follow Jesus. And it's one of the greatest privilege of being a Christian, that we get to share that news of Jesus to others. If we're a Christian, when we understand that Jesus is that living water, then we have that responsibility and the responsibility and the desire to share that news. Once we're saved, we don't have to run away from our past shame, but it's a testimony of how much we are known yet loved. And not only is it a privilege, it's our responsibility to let others know about Him. So I want to take this time to talk with the people around you. How will you respond today? What stood out to you, and how do you want to respond from today's text? So let's do that for a couple minutes, and we'll have the praise band come up to close our service.